Hello and welcome to The Entrepreneurial Musician, a coaching service, podcast, and blog preparing today's musicians for tomorrow's realities. This is TEM217, titled A Simple Process to Give Any Project Clarity. Thank you to Parker Mouthpieces for providing the hosting for TEM. Parker Mouthpieces offers fine, customizable component mouthpieces for horn, trombone, tuba, and euphonium, including the Andrew Hitz Artist Model Tuba Mouthpiece. You can find out more at parkermouthpieces.com or follow them on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. I've got a little story to tell all of you. I recorded TEM217 the other night, and this was Saturday night. It was like 10:45 p.m., which I'm finding that's a time when I can carve out a little space with the kid and the wife. All three of us are home, like we never leave. It's like Gilligan's Island around here. And so I recorded the episode. It went really well. I then went to hit stop, and I then realized that I had never hit record. I did the whole episode, never hit record. So I went upstairs, ate a bowl of cereal like I do every night, which is super healthy, and then made sure there was no cereal in my teeth, since this is now a video podcast as well. And I recorded it again, and I sent it to the cloud as I always do. And my wonderful producer, Will Houchin, who is also a partner at Pedal Note Media, he texted me this morning, the day before this is releasing, said, we have a problem. There's no audio with TEM217. And I then realized that I had the microphone plugged into my old Zoom recorder, not into the mixer, so this is my third attempt at a simple process to give any project clarity, and it's going to go great. I'm not cracking at all. TEM coaching. I have had a number of people inquire lately about my coaching services, my consulting services. I want to thank you. It is probably the most rewarding part of my portfolio career right now. I love helping artists get their art in front of the people that they are meant to serve, and then I love the impact that follows, the income rather, that follows that impact. So I just wanted to say thank you. You know who you are, to the people who have reached out lately. I've really enjoyed talking to you. All right. I basically never plug my other podcasts, certainly not specific episodes on this one. It's called The Brass Junkies because there's a lot of non-brass players who listen to this podcast. However, the most recent episode, TBJ 144, with Marty Hackelman, who's a former horn player for Canadian Brass and Empire Brass, former principal horn of the National Symphony, one of the most accomplished brass players ever. He's unbelievable. The interview that we just did with him changed me. It like rewired parts of my brain. About 4 years ago, he started experiencing dystonia with his chops, and he ended up stopping playing. And like I said, he had an unparalleled career in the classical world for a horn player, literally unparalleled. And he suddenly had to stop playing, and he's 69 now. Like, he was getting up there in terms of playing at that level anyways, but he talks about how it was like a death, and about how it was a loss, and about processing all of that. And it's just this unbelievable conversation that gave me a lot of perspective, and it inspired me I bought a bass from my third partner at Pedal Note Media, Lance Leduc, close to 10 years ago. He was getting rid of it. He'd basically never played it. I was like, I've always wanted to play the bass, never touched it. It's literally been in my closet since I bought it from him 8 or 9 years ago. I took it out right after the interview with Marty, and I have now practiced the bass every single day for 10 days in a row. This like completely rekindled my passion for music and for art. And it wasn't extinguished like that passion, but it was, these are difficult times. I don't have a single tuba gig on the horizon of any kind at all. Everything got canceled, as is the case with most of us. And a lot of places in the world are getting back to normal, but the United States is not one of them. But I've got an amp now. It's amazing. And so you may want to listen to this, even if you have nothing to do with the horn or brass playing. TBJ 144, which is linked to in the show notes, is wonderful. Thank you, Marty, for that. It was a gift. I mean that. It was a gift. I read something from Seth Godin the other day that I wanted to just throw out. It's a quote that I am absolutely going to do a full TEM episode on in the future because it's gold. And I already mentioned this in the TEM Extra from last week for my Patreon patrons. But the quote is this: everyone is either judged or ignored. That's kind of heavy. Everyone is either judged or ignored. So that's a good reminder for me that when I'm judged and it's somebody not saying, yeah, Andrew's awesome, or that thing that Andrew does is great, that it is better to be judged than to be ignored, because most of the videos I stumble on YouTube, I don't have an opinion on. They're not good, they're not bad. I don't even watch them because they're not worth it. So if somebody's judging you, it means that you were worth having an opinion about. And that really resonated with me, so I just wanted to share that with you now in advance of, and I've got a long collection of ideas for future episodes, so that one might be in 2 weeks, and it might be in 6 months. You never know. So everyone is either judged or ignored. I really like that. All right, TEM217, a simple process to give any project clarity. The first process that I would say would be to actually record whatever it is that you're doing and make sure that the sound is working. That's one way to give your project clarity. If this one doesn't come through, I don't know what I'm going to do. I really don't. I think I'm going to crack. Anyway, Lance Leduc, who I just mentioned, a couple of weeks ago, he shared, we used to use Slack, but I kind of hate Slack. It's great, but it's not. We actually started communicating through GroupMe, where I was already hanging out with my knucklehead friends, and that's actually been good for us. It's been easier to communicate that way, and there's been less missed messages, etc. But Lance said we recently have got a lot of momentum. We just started doing live events, which are going really well. We're about to announce another really big one in a few weeks. We have a lot of momentum, but with this momentum, there's a lot of things that need to get done. And historically, we've been like, yeah, let's do this, this, and this. And then we like do one of them, or we do none of them because we don't really prioritize them, and it's, et cetera. So Lance said, there are like 5 things on my to-do list, and I'm not sure, like I could argue that any one of these is the most important thing on my list. That's a problem. That's the equivalent of highlighting an entire page of a book, which is the first time I tried to highlight things when I was in late middle school, early high school. I just highlighted a whole page, and that just means reread the page, except it's in yellow, which is right. If everything is a priority, then nothing is a priority. So we thought about using Asana, which is a cool program and service, and we poked around on that. It didn't really do what we needed it to, or we weren't able to get it to do what we needed to. So anyway, I stumbled on this website called Lucidchart. And Lucidchart enabled me with about 8 minutes, including researching and then actually doing it, to come up with the Stephen Covey 4 quadrants, but to come up with a graphic where, which I'm going to talk about here in a second, but a graphic that myself and Will and Lance were all able to get on in real time. And this Stephen Covey 4 quadrants thing is this really powerful. If you don't know what it is, then go ahead and click in the show notes. There's actually a YouTube video which explains it really well and shows it. And I would it's short. I would highly recommend that you check that out before you listen to the rest of this episode. But we made this chart, and across the top, the top row is important and the bottom row is not important, and then the left column is urgent and the right column is not urgent. So you end up with these 4 quadrants. Upper left is important and urgent, upper right is important and not urgent, lower left is not important but urgent, and the lower right is not important and not urgent. And we took 1 hour, the 3 of us, and we ended up putting close to 25 different things. We've got a lot of irons in the fire right now, which is exciting, but also it's very easy for us to just fall off of things. And we put close to 20 to 25 things up there, and I would say that at least half of the stuff ended up moving from the initial quadrant it was put into a different one. I have done this process a few times, and I personally recommend that you that you take no longer than 10 or 20 seconds to decide which quadrant it goes in, because sometimes doing the rest of the process will illuminate whether something is important and urgent or important and not urgent. And so much stuff ends up moving that it's not a good idea to take 2 or 3 minutes to really agonize over quadrant 1 or quadrant 2, etc. So you just throw the stuff up. And the beauty of, you can do this in person when it's safe to be in the same room with other people and in close proximity. You can do this really well with Post-it notes, of course, like on a big poster board, which I could tell that story sometime on the podcast. That's how Petalnote Media came to be, was with Lance LeDuc during doing an entire business model canvas. This is kind of like a stripped down, that's very much an oversimplification, but this is a very stripped down business model canvas type of an activity, but we were able to do this online in real time, and you can just click and drag, and it's completely free. Lucidchart has tried to upsell me a number of times. I don't even know what the upsell would get me, but this thing is here. It saves automatically, and so we are. This thing is like a tab on my computer right now, on my browser. Tab on my computer. I was about to say I sound old, and some of you are like, dude, I got bad news for you. Yeah, I kind of am old. But anyway, I'm sure as hell not young. That's my age. So I just turned 45 a couple weeks ago. Anyway, moving right along. Yeah, this thing is just, I've been referencing it quite a lot recently, and it's amazing to me how much clarity this process has brought us. I would like to say that if I wasn't doing it with other people, if I was doing this by myself because it was just for myself, or it was for either myself as an individual with like my whole portfolio career, or just myself with one project that I'm working alone, I would highly recommend that you do it and then walk away and then come back an hour or a day or 3 days later, because I think it was 25-30 minutes into this when suddenly there was one thing that we had not thought of, which was so obvious and such a big thing for us that we actually, the three of us, all chuckled because it belonged up there. And if it was just me alone, I might not have caught that. And so it's good to kind of do it and walk away and then come back, in my experience. But this Stephen Covey 4 quadrants thing, I cannot recommend it any more highly in terms of giving clarity as to what your priorities are, either overall or for any given project. One quote from that YouTube video that I mentioned, which is linked in the show notes, which you can always find at tem.fm, is if we work hard on quadrant 2, which is important but not urgent, meaning it needs to get done but not right this second. If we work on that quadrant with focus and consistency, always chipping away at that, it will always continue to minimize the size of quadrant 1, which is important and urgent. That makes a lot of sense, and I like how concisely they put that, because important and not urgent means it needs to get done, and it needs to get done by us or by me, but it doesn't need to get done right now, whereas this updating this website or marketing this thing that happens in 3 days has to happen right now. However, if you put off the important and not urgent stuff long enough, then it becomes important and urgent, because that event that was 3 weeks away is suddenly in the 3 days away category. And I think the key is consistently chipping away at the important / not urgent quadrant, so that the important and urgent quadrant always remains manageable. I think that's really, really important, and I appreciated how they put that. And for me, this process also helps to delineate what's important and what's not important. And important, not important and urgent still needs to get done right away, right? For us, not important is not something that's completely frivolous. It's important stuff. For example, we had a huge event this summer, the brass workshop, where we had 15 faculty members from the New York Philharmonic and from the LA Phil and from the Chicago Symphony, and I mean, it was like this huge event, and we wanted to get a participant feedback so that we could know what they liked, what they didn't like, how we could improve things. That one actually is important, but not urgent, right? It wasn't like we had to do that within a day or two, or else it wasn't going to be any good. Now, if we reached out to them in November when this thing was in June, that's weird. So eventually that would have swung over. But it helps to know what's in the not important versus important, because I have a tendency to chip away at things that are not important when on some level I really don't want to do something that's important because it's unpleasant or it's difficult or I'm not sure how it's going to go. And so I think it's important to to be able to delineate between important and not important. That was deep. I really like the fact that this is now video. There ain't no editing. This is just it. It's just it. So I used to, not all the time, and that didn't happen all that often, but I would just, when I would mess up, I would just pause and start the sentence over just like that. And then you just eliminate. And then as long as there's a pause and then you start with the same inflection, you're off and running. But now you just get the unfiltered babbling of me. So imagine being married to me. Anyway, moving right along. The last thing that I wanted to bring attention to is a TEM blog post, actually, which is a link to an article by Zach Finkelstein and Dana Lynn Varga, and it's also my thoughts on this article. But this article talks about the impossible choice that they call it for college students right now, whether to defer if they are about to start a degree, or to take a year off, or to go to school. This is specifically music majors. And it's very interesting how they break things down. But I think that the thing that really caught my eye, why I wrote about it, is that at the end of the article, the second half of it, they make a list of all of the things that a student could do in a given year to learn all sorts of stuff that they would learn or need to do for a degree, for a fraction of the cost of what a year of tuition would be. And it is really thought-provoking. And I think that this realization that you can do a lot of this, and especially now from your home, is going to have ramifications moving forward for higher education, but also just for how we learn, when we learn, who we learn it from. And I just thought that they really distilled this moment in history really well. And so you can check out the TEM blog post, which is linked to in the show notes if you want to learn more about that. I definitely think it's worth the 8-minute read that it is. So I am really hopeful that this one actually recorded, and that it actually recorded with sound. Thank you to everyone for listening, if the mic is plugged in, for subscribing, for leaving a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get TEM, and simply for your attention, the most valuable commodity any of us have to give. TEM is produced by Will Houchin and is a part of the Pedal Note Media Podcast Network. The theme music for TEM is played by Ben Barron, Rich Kelly, Daniel Lapel, and myself, Andrew Hitz. For show notes, the TEM blog, and to learn more about TEM coaching, please visit our new website, tem.fm. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And we have a brand new YouTube channel. Please do me a favor and subscribe to the YouTube channel, which is linked to here in the show notes, so that I can get up to 100 subscribers is my first goal, so that I can get a customized URL. Right now it's this long nonsensical thing, which is how they start all YouTube channels now. So it'd be a big help if you go and do that. And that's going to do it for another episode of The Entrepreneurial Musician.